Hi, yes, Gail with Traders Help Desk, and this is the market review for the week of July 26th. Now, the first thing I want to go over in this market overview are the reports that we have for this week. And the major report that we have, of course, is the FOMC statement and the federal fund rate, which comes out Wednesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That's going to be the big one this week. The other ones are rated red, and they do have an impact, but the biggest impact will come from the FOMC statement and federal fund release. Okay, the next thing I want to go over is the scanner, which is in multi-charts. And looking at this, you can see that the ADX on the daily is at 81.56. That tells me that this is oversold. If we look over to the RSI value, you can also see that it is oversold. Because this is a dark color here and the value is at 62, I also know that we have a magenta peak in the background. That is the only way that that value could be dark. And you can again see that if you look at the RSI, that value is below -50. Again, just confirming that you are indeed oversold on both the 720 and the 1440. Now, we also had this scenario last week, and we were expecting a pullback, but we needed the volume divergence to come in. You can see now that on the 1440, you have potential volume divergence. In other words, you have made a new low, but sellers did not come in strong. You also see that on the 1440, you made a new low, and again, sellers did not come in as strong as they should. On the 720, that is confirmed divergence. On the 1440, it is potential. In other words, it has not been confirmed yet. It will probably be confirmed on Monday. Now, I know if we pull back to this ATR on the 720, that's going to give us a magenta peak on the 1440. So this week on gold, we could see somewhere around 1150, 1140 area. You also see on the 45-minute, we have broken through the ATR in the congestion dot. You also see that we've had divergence. You also see that the ADX is above 70 here. This tells me that we should expect a pullback to the ATR. When this pulls back to the ATR, that's where I want to read the volume. If it comes in with diverging volume, we can expect a new high to be made on the 45-minute chart. Now, if we go over and look at the NinjaTrader 45-minute chart, you do see these green lines up here. That tells me there is resistance above. Typically, what will happen is price will go up, it will pull back, and then it could potentially continue up. It is at the ATR where you want to read the volume to see if sellers diminish. If sellers diminish, that means that ATR will not be broken and it will continue higher. Now we're going to look at crude. Now on crude, you're right at the point of being oversold. You can see that we had a flat magenta peak here. That told me that it would go back and test this low. And so far as it's come back to test that low, we have potential divergence here. In fact, I would say that's confirmed because this was an inside bar here. So I'm expecting crude to at least go up to the ATR that is on the 720. That's the only potential that would stop it. over on the 180, you do see that you have a congestion dot up here. So more than likely it will pop up to the congestion dot and then it will come back to test the ATR. On the test of this ATR, that's where you need to read the volume. Now, if we look over at the scanner window, you do see that we are oversold on the 1440. It is not oversold on the RSI. So this one is not equal to the one that we saw up here. Here we had two different indicators telling us that we were oversold, plus the volume was diverging. Here we have a potential of being oversold on Monday, but the RSI is not overextended. These are two different measurement tools, which is why I use them. So one is saying, yes, we may get a retracement on the 1440. It's also been confirmed by the volume divergence, but we could actually end up just going to the congestion dot on the 180. That could stop crude from going up further, or the ATR on the 720. If you look over to the Ninja Trader, you can see that we have resistance up at 56. We also have resistance at about 54. So any of these areas could potentially stop crude from increasing in price. Okay, on the Nasdaq, you see that we've completed this retracement on the 1440. We're at this ATR that may support price. From the looks of it, it is going to support price to go up. You also see that we're at a congestion dot on the 720, and there's no selling going on. If you look up at the 180-minute chart, you can see there's potential divergence there as this was making new lows. On the 45-minute, that's going to be the first one that plays out, you have a magenta peak. So I'm expecting it to pull back to this ATR. It may even gap up today. Then I would look, because I actually think this is going to try to pull back to the ATR here. And if that happens, then I would take a short position to the downside. If that were to happen, what you will see is that this ATR will be flipped and then it will come back to test it before continuing up to here. There is a setup right now, a potential coming in for the 720 to go up, for the 1440 to go up, and as it stands right now, this one will be going up. So you would want to read the volume at this area to see if price is going to continue down. Right now, it does not look like it will continue down. If you look over to the Nasdaq, you can see that we have taken out the previous high of the previous bar. Again, I'm expecting this to actually pull back probably to around 45.80, and that just tells me that's the area that I want to read the volume. Notice how you have the red and green lines here. And this is exactly what I tell you to look for, because this area can actually support price to go up. And that's exactly what it looks like it's going to do right now. Now let's go look at the Dow, and you can see that I've added ticks to line in the sand and the line in the sand value on the ADX. Notice that the 180-minute, you're already getting long divergence, and the value is at 64.6. You're 48 ticks away from making a magenta peak. Now, if I correlate that value with this value, then if the retracement occurs on the 45-minute, more than likely you're also going to get a magenta peak on the 180. How did I know to correlate that? Number one, this is a dark background here. The only way that could be dark is if we have had a magenta peak. We have had a magenta peak. It is now in the process of retracing back to this ATR. If this retracement completes, then you are going to have a magenta peak come in on the 180-minute chart. That's what this is telling you. There's 48 ticks away from making a magenta peak on the 180-minute, excuse me. And right now the magenta peak is actually retracing on the 45-minute chart. It has 47 ticks back to the ATR to complete that retracement. We can take that one step further and look at the 720. We have 186 ticks back to the ATR if we get a magenta peak here. Again, by looking at the 180, we can say, okay, if the magenta peak comes in on the 180 as it stands right now, and we get the retracement completed on the 180-minute chart, that means it moves up 175 ticks. We're going to be at the point of making a magenta peak on the Dow. Now, that may sound confusing, but it's not. What we're doing, we've moved down. Now we're moving back to the ATR. If this completes, that means that we're also going to get a retracement here. If this one completes, we're also going to get a retracement here. So that tells me that we have potential to go up, potential to go up, potential to go up. Now, when you look up at the 1440, you see that you have potential volume divergence. It will take at least one more bar to confirm that volume divergence. So right now, yes, it could go up, but it's not confirmed. On the 45-minute, that is absolutely confirmed. It should go back to that ATR. On the 180, more than likely, it will go up. On the 720, more than likely, it will go up, depending on the 45-minute and whether the retracement on the 45-minute actually completes. Now, you do see that you're almost at the point of being oversold on the 180, definitely oversold on the 45-minute. So that's a pretty good indication that we are going to see some upward movement this week on the Dow. Now, if we go over and look at the NinjaTrader 45-minute chart, you can see that it has broken through the red line here. Okay, now they're going to come back and they're going to test that red line to see whether it resists price. That's going to be the key on the Dow 45-minute chart. If they break this area, okay, they will come back to test it for support. Then we're likely to go into these areas up here. Okay, we're going to look at the S&P 500 now. You can see that the 1440 is slightly different. We have overhead resistance, and that overhead resistance has held since around June 16th. So we've come back up to it, then down, back up to it, then down. On the volume, you can see there was not a lot of sellers this week, but this is not confirmed yet. This is just potential as it stands right now. Over on the 720-minute chart, you can see that we've moved up, went to the ATR, bounced slightly, and then broken through that. Now, as it stands right now, you're not seeing a lot of sellers in that market. And that's one thing to pay attention to. Although it is not confirmed, it's still potential. And that means that it could still go down. Okay. But sellers are not increasing. And with this downtrend, you would expect sellers to be coming in very strong. So then when we look up to the 180, there's a couple of things on the 180. Number one, you're at 66.29 on the ADX. So you're very close to the point of being oversold on the 180-minute chart. You can also see here, again, this is a dark background, It's at 65, and you also see that the RSI is at 57. So this tells me, number one, it was oversold, and number two, is in the middle of a retracement. Now, again, if we use the same concept that I just explained, you have 27 ticks to the ATR. If it completes its 27 ticks, you will be right at the point of making a magenta peak on the 180-minute chart. So, you could see a retracement of about 100 ticks as it stands right now on the ES. We're expecting it to come to this ATR. If it does come to this ATR, then more likely than not, you're also going to come to the ATR on the 180-minute chart. Now, this will pull back some, will pull down towards price. So it won't go all the way to 2100. It could actually end up being somewhere around there. Let's go over to the 45-minute Ninja Trader chart, and this to me highlights it better than anything. You see all of this resistance above price. So if it is able to clear this first area, you've got 3 areas above that, and then the next area is both a green line and the golden line. The green line comes from the 180. The gold line comes from the 720. So we could actually see a retracement somewhere around 2090 on the ES. But to do that, it has a lot of resistance to overcome before it can actually continue up. Okay, let's look at the euro this week. We do have an area of resistance here and an area of resistance here on the 1440. Now that is going to provide resistance on the euro. You also see some resistance here on the 720. The 180 is moving up. It has just tested the ATR. There was absolutely nothing in the way of selling going on, so it has moved up again. You can also see that we're in an area of congestion on the 45-minute chart. The ADX is not overextended, so we could actually see the euro continue up, test the congestion dot, and then come back and test this ATR. We could see the market gap down tonight testing this ATR. Either way, I think the test of this ATR will be the most important. So far, no sellers have actually come into this market. So I think we're going to see at least some movement to the upside on the euro. The only potential for a magenta peak is actually on the 45-minute chart. You are about 12 ticks away from making that magenta peak, and there's only a potential retracement of about 24 ticks. So this is not something you would trade back to the ATR. You would just wait, let that retracement occur, and then potentially take a position to the upside. If you're looking over at the 45-minute Ninja Trader chart, you see that you do have overhead resistance here, and then you have overhead resistance here. This is the area that concerns me the most, are these 4 lines. There's 3 from the 720, 1 from the 180. You also see that you have this red line right here. And this is the one that's going to probably test and then continue up. Other than that, I see nothing on the euro. Okay, the next market I actually want to go over is the Aussie. And you can see that we're actually getting a magenta peak in right now on the 180-minute chart. It's 53 ticks away from the ATR. All of the other time frames, higher time frames, are still going down. And you can see that because the ADX is red and so is the RSI. You're not at a point of making a magenta peak on either one of these time frames. So these time frames are saying down, This one is saying down. This one is saying, okay, we will come back and we will test this ATR, which is around the 7,300 area. You also see on the 45-minute, this retracement has already completed. They will need to flip this ATR, then they will retest the ATR before this continues up. If we look over at the 45-minute Aussie using NinjaTrader in these congestion zones, we see that we have congestion zones from about 7,400 up to a little above 7,450. So what will happen is they will flip this ATR, which is at 72.74. Then they will come back and test it to make sure that there is support. In other words, first they break the resistance and then they come back and they test it for support. Once that happens, then we could see 7,400 to 7,450 on the Aussie. Okay, the final one I'm going to go over is the Canadian dollar. And you can see that we've gone flat on the Canadian dollar magenta peak. That tells me that it will go back and it will test that low, which it has so far done. Now, as it tested that low, you can see that sellers did not come in strong. So we had divergence on the buyer side. Now we have divergence on the seller side. Typically, what I would anticipate for this scenario is that we would have a blue ATR over here, and then it would come back and test it to make sure that that area is going to support it. Right now, as it stands on the 45-minute, we're getting diverging volume, buying volume. So that tells me that we may make a new low or a higher low. In other words, this will go up and then it will come back and it will make a new low about right here. Okay, that's where you could start looking for it to flip this ATR. Now, over on the 180-minute chart, notice that we are not in magenta histogram bars. That tells me we're not going to get a magenta peak on the 180-minute chart. The only potential magenta peak that we could get would be on the 1440. Now, with there being divergence on the buyer side, I would expect it to come back and try to at least make a higher low, potentially come back and test this low. If we look over to the 45-minute chart, you can see that we have a congestion dot that's already formed at 76.82. So what I would anticipate is already flipped the ATR on NinjaTrader. It typically will come back and test this area around 76.40. That's exactly the same area that I marked over here. And then you want to read the volume at this area. If no sellers come in, that means it will at least get to 76.82. If it breaks the 76.82 area, we could see 77.20, 77.30 on the Canadian. I do think it will be probably Tuesday or Wednesday before this sets up on the Canadian. And again, if you're looking at the 1440, as it stands right now, there's only 131 ticks back to the ATR, and it's 67 ticks to make that magenta peak. That tells me you're only going to be able to trade that for about 60 ticks. So not as interested in the Canadian as I would be, let's say, in the Aussie or the indices. I hope you enjoyed the market overview. It is a little bit longer this week, but again, I do hope that you enjoyed it, and we will be having the free live trading room on Thursday at 8:30 Eastern Time. Thank you.